Welcome, everybody who's watching live as well as watching us on replay at some later date. We're really excited to have you joining us today. This is my monthly live conversation with different experts talking about different topics related to management and leadership and all things related to work and life and balancing it all together. I'm really excited for today's conversation. I actually just returned from two back-to-back conferences and two different parts of the country. And as I was speaking to leaders and employees, a lot of people were talking about employee engagement and the importance of employee engagement. Today, I'm thrilled to have Megan Negrey with me to talk about how to lead with employee engagement in mind. And I really, really appreciate Megan's willingness to make this work, given that her internet service just sent her an email saying, or a message saying that they're experiencing an outage. So thank you for tethering on your phone and making this work. I really appreciate your willingness to do that, given this conversation and your flexibility and your nimbleness around this. I think it goes to how we have to be nimble in all aspects of our lives these days. We'd love to know where folks are joining us from, so please hop on to the chat, whichever platform you are in. We are streaming to LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube using Restream. So there is a slight delay, about 20-second delay, but we'd love to know where you're joining us, watching us from, either live or if you join us at a later date and watch this recording, let us know in the comments where you are, and we'd love to connect with professionals. As I said, today's discussion is how we can lead with employee engagement in mind. I was really surprised to hear that a poll by Gallup said U.S. employee engagement sank to a 10-year low. They do an annual engagement survey with only 31% of U.S. employees feeling that they are engaged at work in 2024. Clearly, there is a lot of opportunity for ensuring that we do a better job as leaders and organizations in connecting with our employees. Megan, I'd like to start by jumping right in with the big picture. What is your definition of employee engagement? I think it's important for us to start with a level ground and a definition to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, that's a great question and good idea to get our set expectations right at the start. For me, employee engagement, it's the level of connection someone feels to their work, their team, and the company's mission. It's not about just feeling happy or satisfied. It's about feeling seen and supported and challenged to grow. And I think engagement really shows up when people have those clear set expectations and real opportunities for development, psychological safety, and meaningful recognition. It's not about the perks that an organization offers, but it's about purpose and clarity and that connection.
I love that. Oftentimes we think about, oh, we'll add this additional perk, a gym membership, and that gets them engaged. And I think those are important. Considering everybody's well-being is a really important aspect of overall taking care of our colleagues and teams. But how do we create a sense of belonging, right, and connection with the work, with the purpose and the mission of the organization, the company? The Gallup statistics I mentioned earlier paint a concerning picture, at least for me, that such a low number of individuals and a low percentage of individuals are feeling connected to and engaged with their work. What are some of the key drivers behind this decline in employee engagement, especially among younger workers, which Gallup said is a particular concern at this time?
Yeah, I've noticed a few key drivers behind the decline, especially among people who are early in their careers. First is, especially early in the career, people have real desire for purpose in their work, a clear growth path, and they want honest feedback. When transparency is lacking, especially around growth or connection, or when manager communication is weak, people are left unclear on how they're doing or how they can grow. And that's incredibly disengaging. Another big factor, big one recently that might be a big one for the current decline, is the remote hybrid disconnect. A lot of companies shifted to hybrid work, but they didn't update their systems, their support, their culture to really support that and match it. And so people are left feeling untethered, like they're just working in a vacuum without that connection. And that lack of intentionality, I think, really erodes that connection really fast.
Mm. So, can you talk a little bit more about the intentionality and what leaders might keep in mind as they're thinking about how to be intentional with the work, and how to be intentional in thinking about growth and purpose and feedback? Are there specific strategies you've advised your leaders in your past roles and organizations?
Yeah, one on the intentionality for the hybrid work is I've seen some places just mandate you have to be in a certain amount of days a week, but no other support or structure around that, even by your individual team. And what happens is someone ends up going into the office for a day and then just sitting on Zoom talking with people who are working home from that day. And so that lack of intentionality around the rule really just kind of negates all of the work towards it.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you. That I appreciate that very tangible example. Uh, I also want to acknowledge that in this day and age where I feel like we're all going 24/7 and are connected all the time, right? Leaders might be feeling overwhelmed by these challenges. What's the first step they should take to understand the engagement levels with their own teams right now?
Yeah, I think the first step leaders can take to engage with their team is to ask how they're doing and to ask meaningfully and listen. They should use one on ones not just for status updates and how this project's going, but to genuinely understand their team's experience. Ask about friction points. Where are they getting stuck? What are they really having a great collaboration on? What's draining their energy? What is exciting them? It's in those conversations that you start to see the patterns of where people are getting engaged or disengaged. It's those everyday moments of curiosity and care that really help the engagement.
I love that so much. I attended a conference this I came back yesterday actually, and one of the interesting things people said, and it was specifically for nonprofits, so you would think we are all providing services and caring for our community and working to make the world a better place, that not all employers and managers were actually asking how are you to their employees before jumping into their agenda whenever they had those one-on-one interactions. But asking somebody how are you, and then maybe even how are you really, right? Because in the US specifically, I think this conference was an international one, so it's different in different countries and cultures. But in the US we tend to say how are you and not stop to hear the answer. So in those conversations, whether formal conversations or informal conversations, really taking the time to say, how are you really? What's going well? What are some opportunities? What do you think we could do better here? Um, I also have challenged leaders to think about stay conversations, right? What would get you to stay with our organization? What are some areas of growth that you would like to experience? And how can you have that conversation with employees? I think a lot of people are afraid to ask this, to start the stay conversation and ask what would get you to stay here, because they're not sure if they can deliver on it. Have you ever advised leaders on that stay portion of it?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for stay conversations, with that caveat that you need to listen to the feedback that you receive in the conversation. It's actually going to hurt more if you just have the conversation and then don't do anything versus not having it. But having the conversation, even if you can't react to everything that is bothering them or kind of triggering them to maybe look to leave somewhere else, if you have the conversation and listen and show that you're thinking through what they're going through, that creates a good level of engagement with people.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you. If you ask, let's use the return to work, right? If you survey people and ask them, and most say we like hybrid, and then you mandate full time back, I think that hurts more than it helps. And uh, uh, employees feeling like the voices were heard. And I think,
Well, at the same time, they could like ask people, say they like hybrid, be like, well, we do have to go back full time. Here are the reasons why, rather than just like mandating, explain so people know that they were
I
heard.
think the why is so important, right? And a lot of this, so I appreciate that. Uh, Clearly, this requires some mindset shifts for leaders. So I wanted to ask you, what are some key shifts in the mindset and behavior that leaders need to adopt to lead with employee engagement at the forefront?
Yeah, it's such a great question. One of them actually goes back to what you were just saying with the why being so important. I think a really big mind shift leaders need is to move from control to clarity. Instead of micromanaging the how, focus on aligning the team together on what you're trying to achieve, the why, and then work together on how you're going to achieve that. Another, I think, really good mindset shift for managers to have is to go from feedback avoidance to feedback fluency. You make feedback a regular, safe, and a two-way practice. It really engages with all of the aspects people are experiencing in their day-to-day work. And then you want to model the values you want to see through that. So if you're not embodying,
Oh, I think you may,
to either.
sorry, I think you may
Oh,
have frozen for lead with visibility. You were talking about that.
yeah, if you well, like lead visibly and model the values you want the team to see. If you're not embodying them, your team's not going to embody them either because they don't have that model to see.
Great. Well, I know some people have joined us on using the various platforms. We're so excited to see folks on the restream. Please let us know where you are watching us from, whether it's your living room or your office or any particular location, state or country, whatever you are comfortable sharing. We'd love to know where people are today as we're live or during the restream, and when we watch it at a later date. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. We're excited to have live conversation and certainly have you asking questions or comments and sharing your experience and knowledge and expertise as well. This is a space to start the conversation going. You said so much in that one answer that I want to touch on. I teach a leadership and management class, and we were just talking about feedback, and the feedback being more specific. It's easy to say to somebody, "You're awesome," and they are awesome, and that's fabulous, and I'm sure they love hearing it. There's a way to say, "You're awesome because you always anticipate what we're going to need." Right, a very specific way of somebody hearing how are they awesome and how they can replicate that, or giving constructive feedback. Earlier in my career, it was the feedback sandwich, which was a big thing. We used to hear about something positive, the feedback, something that I think people don't like it, and psychologically it's not a great way for managers to share feedback. But creating that space where knowing that, Megan, if you and I are working together and I'm giving you feedback, it's because of I care for you, right? That's coming from a place of wanting to see you get better. I had referenced the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I don't know if you've read that, and the feedback forum. And she talks about how Sheryl Sandberg had tried to give her feedback very kindly and gently, and she wouldn't hear about her public speaking practice. And eventually Sheryl had to be very, very direct with her. I won't spoil the story for those who may want to read this story, but knowing how the person in front of you is going to receive that feedback, right? And leaning in or leaning out in terms of how gentle or how direct you are being with somebody, and sharing with vulnerability, right? Brene Brown's work does a lot of research around vulnerability. Vulnerability and authenticity to me doesn't mean you're sharing everything with no filter, right? It means we're sharing appropriate information and are experiencing something that with others, so we create a space where mistakes are welcome. So do you have any specific examples from your past work where you've seen leaders do this specifically and directly with their team members that has been received well?
Yeah, some examples I've seen where feedback works well is I've seen some teams create their own team values. And by co-creating those together, the team has ownership of them, and they have a framework for how to approach feedback. Is when you have the feedback rooted in those values that you all decided on together, the feedback comes across as less critical and more as a supportive way to grow. Another big one is a team's switching to a growth mindset. Is then if you're in a fixed mindset, any feedback could be seen as you're not good enough at this. But if you approach it as a growth mindset, it's this is where I think you could be even better.
That's great. So much of this comes down to communication, right? And having a two-way, as you said, communication structure. Are there any other practices or communications ideas or frameworks or thoughts you have around communication that can help foster greater employee engagement?
Yeah, some of the most effective communication practices that I've seen that foster engagement are consistency and transparency. And those two together over time help build that trust, which then boosts engagement. You want to create a real two-way dialogue, like we're saying with feedback, and act on the feedback you received. It doesn't mean saying yes to everything like we were talking about, but it does mean acknowledging what you've heard and explaining how you're thinking about it, going back to the why. That follow through is where you build the trust. And then also normalize vulnerability. You don't have to have the answers. No one expects anyone to have all of the answers all of the time. But I think one of the most powerful things a leader can do is to say, I don't know, but let's find out. And that mindset and approach, I think, builds a lot of psychological safety on a team and shows your team that it's okay to learn out loud. You don't have to learn on your own. Let's learn together.
Ooh, I love that. The I don't know, let's find out is a phrase that's a great to use in the workplace. I think leadership and how we view leadership has definitely changed over time in our world, right? The command and control type of leadership, sometimes we have to use that in emergency settings, or um, if you're an EMT or a first responder, you are taught to use that command and control because you need to have mastery and control of the situation. You have to point to somebody and say, Megan, go dial 911, because if you say somebody dial 911, a lot of people look at each other and nobody does. So I do think there are instances where, and crises where we have to have very clear roles. But in other instances, we can take the time to say, let's find out, or I trust you to come up with some ideas. Why don't, Megan, why don't you go look and find out what the answer might be to this, or what are 2 to 3 solutions we might implement for this particular idea, and let's talk together about what you've learned, rather than always having the answer to give to somebody. All right. The other thing that actually in my class came up, I have an assignment that is not very specific for our students. And I remember the students asking me specifically, how many pages, what font, etc., which in an educational setting, that's what people are used to. For me, that's not truly how the world of work works, right? In most instances, yes, you have the brand guidelines, etc. And you, in an ideal world, you're saying we want to go from A to Z. John, you're responsible for figuring out the steps. Let's touch base when you're at D and talk about it, or I'm here to support you, but I don't need to directly give you how you get from A to Z, right? You create your own roadmap. And there was a lot of discomfort with my students, and these are adult learners who are practitioners in their world. Um, Tell me how many pages, tell me exactly what you're looking for. And there was such beauty in what was created because I gave them the freedom to say, one, this is not an art project, right? I'm not judging you based off of how beautiful it is or document is. This is about the content and how you can apply the concepts from class to your work and organization and your life. And the end result was amazing. Students did very, very brief presentations to class. And one of the students at the end said, I want to see everybody's project because I've come up with new ways of thinking about how I can tackle this, right? How I could have done this assignment. So I love when you're talking about the dialogue and not having a one specific answer. We would be remiss in this time if we didn't touch on employee recognition programs. So oftentimes that's part of the engagement process. And I wanted to ask you, what makes a recognition program truly effective in driving engagement rather than seeming like just one more thing that the company does that's not truly working?
Yeah, I think there are 4 key elements that make a recognition program truly effective. I think it has to be timely, peer enabled, specific, and value aligned. By timely, I mean recognition should happen throughout the year, not just during annual reviews, but the frequent in the moment, even just verbal recognition helps sustain engagement and reinforces the positive behaviors in real time. Another one, peer enabled recognition is huge. It doesn't always need to come just from managers, but when teammates recognize each other, it builds connection and strengthens the team culture. It makes it not a competition, but a collaboration. The third one, make it specific, I think, to the person. One size fits all doesn't work because everyone is different from each other. Like that's what makes people beautiful, is we all are our own person. And if you anchor a specific recognition to your team's values, it reinforces the right behaviors. One of my favorite examples was a manager who gifted someone an e-reader preloaded with their favorite leadership books after they stepped into a stretched leadership role. It was personal, timely, meaningful, and aligned with the team's core value of growth. Because with the value alignment, it's the intentionality that matters, because you're reinforcing behaviors. And if you are intentional about what you're reinforcing, then that's what you'll see. Otherwise, you're going to reinforce something and you might not like what it is.
I so appreciate you touching on the peer-to-peer recognition and opportunities to highlight each other's work. It's interesting. Again, I've been a manager for quite some time, and it used to be people left organizations because of the manager, and that's not necessarily the case anymore. I hear people leave because of culture, because of overall practices, not just one person, right? What is the larger team? Because people are working in teams a lot more than before. So I appreciate you talking about that. Andrea actually put a comment saying, I think of my teens theater experience when I visualize a feedback model that builds growth mindset and psychological safety. All cast members know that feedback is expected in the lead up to opening night. That's such a great reminder. Thank you, Andrea, for watching and sharing with us. They take the feedback, right, in theater and a lot of performance. There's a lot of feedback in performing arts and other types of arts. So we can certainly lean in and learn from that experience. Do you have any thoughts on what Andrea has shared, Megan?
Yeah, I love that. I love how it has that set expectation too of everyone knows that feedback is expected in the lead up. And so when they do get feedback, it doesn't feel like a call out. It feels like something they were waiting to hear on how they can improve.
That's great. Yeah, I think people don't enjoy being put on the spot, right? And feeling like they're being called out, but that natural. Um, I've used the start, stop, continue framework in certain conversation. What can I start doing to support you better? What am I doing that's driving everybody crazy or not working, so I can stop doing that? And what are things that are working well, so we should continue building on that. We love some audience questions. If there are additional questions or thoughts or comments, please feel free to share them. um, and we are coming up on time, Megan. The 30 minutes seems to fly by really quickly. Um, you talked on having growth opportunities. What role does providing opportunities for growth and development play in keeping employees engaged, especially those younger than 35? Again, Gallup had identified that as a particularly vulnerable group that's not feeling extremely engaged at the moment.
Yeah, I think growth and development, it's everything, especially for folks early in their career. If people don't see a path forward, they'll go somewhere else that offers one. And the key is to build visible and co-owned development paths. Don't just tell people early in their career, this is what your growth looks like, but instead ask, where do you want to grow and how can we support you getting there together? That shift of telling versus building together makes a huge difference, makes people feel like their growth is valued and that their manager is invested. And then people are more likely to stay engaged even when there's challenges because they feel supported. through their growth.
They're seen as a human, and they're first, right, rather than the product or the project or the company. Uh, Themes that have stood out to me: co-creating, dialogue, two-way conversations. We keep going back to those conversations and building more engaged teams and organizations. As we're at time, any final words of wisdom, Megan, to those in our audience watching live or watching the replay?
Yeah, this has been such a great conversation too. Thank you for having me on here. One final thought I'll leave with is that engagement isn't something you just fix once. It's something that you have to build every day and be really intentional about.
Great. Yes, it's a practice, right? It's not a one-time fix, checkbox, done. Thank you.
It's,
Yeah, the continual evolution. Thank you so much, Megan, for joining me today and for a fabulous conversation. I'm really excited that we had the opportunity to chat. Thanks to those who participated and watched live. Thanks to Andrea for sharing how we can learn from other areas and the arts on how to provide appropriate feedback and share with each other. I look forward to our next conversation. And again, Megan, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being such an awesome trooper while you have internet issues. This was a fabulous conversation, and I look forward to continuing the conversation online. So keep sharing ideas and topics, and we will see you next time. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Thanks, Megan.